Seattle rains don't wash the city clean, they just make the grime slicker, turning the asphalt into a black mirror reflecting neon desperation. It was 2:14 a.m. The graveyard hour. The time of night that belongs to the insomniacs, the hunted, and the predators. The overhead fluorescent lights buzzed with the sound of a dying insect, a headache-inducing hum that Cassidy Miller, 26, had tuned out years ago. She stood behind the Formica counter, her reflection in the stainless steel coffee urn showing a woman who looked 10 years older than her birth certificate claimed. Her uniform, a pastel blue polyester tragedy from the late 80s, was stained with old fryer grease and despair. She smelled of stale coffee and cheap disinfectant, a scent that had seeped into her pores, immune to any soap she could afford. "Refill, darling?" Cassidy blinked, the haze of exhaustion lifting. She looked down at Amart Abernathy in booth 1. He was a fixture here, a man who spent his meager Social Security checks on cherry pie and lukewarm decaf just to hear another human voice. "Coming right up, Artie," Cassidy said, her voice raspy, textured like sandpaper. She moved with the mechanical efficiency of the working poor. Her orthopedic shoes squeaked against the linoleum as she grabbed the pot. A sharp ache throbbed in her lower back, a reminder of the double shift, and the stack of medical bills waiting on her kitchen counter like a loaded gun. $7,000 for her mother's dialysis. She had $42 in checking. The bell above the entrance didn't tinkle. It screamed as the door was kicked open, shattering the 2 a.m. lull. The atmospheric shift was violent and instant. The damp, freezing wind of 4th Avenue rushed in, carrying the scent of ozone and rot. 3 men stormed the threshold. Oversized hoodies, balaclavas, and the frantic, twitchy energy of methamphetamines. "Everybody down. Now. Get on the ground," the lead gunman screamed. He racked a sawed-off shotgun, the metal rusted, the barrel jagged where it had been hacked with a hacksaw. The diner was a tomb. Beside Abernathy, there was only a trucker named Bill passed out in the back, and the man in booth 4. Cassidy froze. The coffee pot hovered in midair. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a frantic bird trapped in a cage, but her face went dead. A mask of stone. She had grown up in a house ruled by a violent, alcoholic father. She learned early, fear's blood in shark-infested waters. "I said get down, bitch." The leader vaulted the counter, his sneakers slipping on the grease. He shoved the cold steel of the shotgun barrel into Cassidy's cheek. It smelled of sulfur and unwashed dirt. "Open the register," the man hissed, his eyes wide, pupils blown out, visible through the ragged holes of his ski mask. "Don't make me paint this wall with your brains." In booth 4, the newspaper lowered an inch. Stefano Raldi sat perfectly still. He wore a charcoal bespoke suit that cost more than the building they were sitting in. His hair was slicked back, dark as oil, and his eyes were a piercing, unnatural shade of gray, like storm clouds before a tornado. The papers called him a businessman. The FBI called him the Ghost. He was the don of the Raldi crime family, currently enjoying a rare moment of silence without his phalanx of bodyguards. Stefano's hand drifted inside his jacket, fingers wrapping around the textured grip of a custom 1911.45 caliber. He assessed the threat in milliseconds. *3 hostiles. 1 shotgun, 2 9mm handguns held sideways. Fingers on triggers. Poor discipline. Junkies looking for a fix. I can drop the leader, double tap the one by the door, and break the third one's neck before the brass hits the floor. 4 seconds. Max *. But he didn't draw. He watched the waitress. Most civilians beg. They cry. They bargain with a god they haven't prayed to in years. Cassidy Miller didn't flinch. She slowly set the glass coffee pot down on the warmer. Click. She didn't want it to shatter. She turned her gaze to the gunman, looking past the rusty barrel and straight into his bloodshot eyes. "The register is jammed," Cassidy said. Her voice was steady. Not defiant, just factual. "You have to jiggle the key." If you shoot me, you don't get the money. And the cops are already on their patrol loop down Fifth Avenue. You have exactly 90 seconds before blue lights show up. The gunman blinked, the adrenaline glitching in his brain. Don't lie to me. I'm not lying, Cassidy said, raising her hand slowly, palms open. I'm telling you how to manage your workflow so you can leave. I make $9 an hour, sir. I don't care about this money. But Mr. Abernathy over there has a pacemaker. If you scream again, you might kill him, and that turns a petty robbery into a murder charge. You don't want a murder charge. The needle hurts. Stefano's grip on his weapon loosened. He was fascinated. This wasn't bravery, it was a complete dissociation from fear. She was project managing a felony. The gunman looked at his accomplices, uncertain. Check the old guy. Leave him, Cassidy commanded. The shift in her tone was subtle but absolute. It was the voice of authority. Take the register. Take the tip jar. Leave the customers. She punched the code. 3-3-9-1. She jiggled the key exactly as she had predicted, and the drawer popped open with a metallic ding. She scooped the cash, maybe $200 in greasy small bills, and shoved it into a brown paper takeout bag. Here, she said, shoving the bag into the gunman's chest. There's a back exit through the kitchen. It leads to the alley. No cameras back there. Go. The gunman grabbed the bag, looking at her with confusion. He held the gun, but she held the power. You say anything to the cops, we come back, he threatened, but his voice cracked. It was weak. Go, she repeated. The three men scrambled back over the counter, knocking over a display of day-old donuts and SPR. In through the kitchen swinging doors. The back alley door slammed shut with a heavy thud. Silence rushed back into the diner, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the rain drumming on the roof. Cassidy let out a breath she had been holding for 2 minutes. Her hands trembled, just once, a violent shudder. Then, she clenched them into fists until her knuckles turned white. She walked out from behind the counter to Mr. Abernathy, who was clutching his chest, his face the color of ash. It's okay, Artie, she soothed, pouring him a fresh cup of water with a steady hand. They're gone. Just breathe. In and out. From booth 4, Stefano Raldi stood up. He placed a crisp $100 bill on the table for a $3 coffee. He walked to the counter, towering over her, 6'3" of Italian muscle wrapped in tailored wool. Cassidy looked up, wiping a smudge of donut frosting off the counter. She looked exhausted, brittle, but unbroken. Are you okay, sir? She asked. Stefano stared at her. You had a shotgun in your face. It's Tuesday. Cassidy shrugged, reaching for the landline to dial 911. In this neighborhood, that's practically a greeting. You handled them, Stefano said, his voice low, a baritone rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. You saved the old man. I just wanted them out, she said, pressing the receiver to her ear. Police, please. Robbery at Jerry's on 4th. Stefano studied her profile. She was thin, dangerously so. Her cheekbones were sharp enough to cut glass, and dark circles bruised the skin under her hazel eyes. But there was a fire there. A quiet, enduring steel he rarely saw in his own capos, let alone a waitress in a grease trap. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a business card. Heavy black cardstock. Gold embossing. No name. Just a number and a symbol, a stylized, roaring lion. If you ever need a job where people don't point guns at you for minimum wage, Stefano said, sliding the card across the formica, call this number. Cassidy glanced at it, then back at him. I'm fine, mister. I have a job. Stefano smirked, a rare, dangerous expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. For now. He turned and walked out into the rain, disappearing into the darkness before the sirens even began to wail in the distance. Cassidy stared at the card. A shiver went down her spine that had nothing to do with the damp cold. She tucked the black card into her apron pocket. Just in case. The fallout was immediate and cruel. The police took her statement, treating her more like a suspect than a victim. They asked why she opened the register so fast. They asked if she knew the men. Cassidy sat on the torn vinyl stool, answering the same questions 3 times, her patience fraying like a rope under tension. By the time the police left, it was 4 a.m. The owner, a sweaty, balding man named Jerry the Weasel Henderson, stormed in through the back door. He didn't ask if Cassidy was bleeding. He went straight to the register. $240. Jerry screamed, his face turning beet red, veins bulging in his neck. You gave them $240. They had a gun, Jerry, Cassidy said, her voice flat. She was scrubbing the counter where the gunman's dirty sneaker had left a print. It was the money or Artie's life. You didn't even try to hit the panic button. Jerry spat, saliva flying. Insurance deductibles are going to kill me. And now the cops are going to be crawling all over this place, scaring away the regulars. He looked at Cassidy with pure disdain. He had never liked her. She wasn't flirtatious. She didn't laugh at his lewd jokes. She asked for her overtime pay. You're fired, Jerry said. The world seemed to stop spinning. Cassidy dropped the rag. What? You invited it, Jerry lied, grasping for any excuse to hurt her. You're too calm. It's suspicious. I can't have employees who are friendly with the local trash. Hand in yo. You are apron. Jerry, please. Cassidy's voice finally cracked. The steel facade broke. My mom's treatment is due on Friday. I need this shift. I need this job. Not my problem, he sneered. Get out before I call the cops back and tell them you were in on it. Cassidy walked out into the rain 10 minutes later. She didn't have an umbrella. The water soaked through her thin coat instantly, chilling her to the marrow. She walked the 6 blocks to her apartment building, a crumbling brick structure where the elevator had been broken since the Bush administration. She climbed the 4 flights of stairs, her legs feeling like lead. When she opened the door to apartment 4B, the sound of a coughing fit greeted her. Her mother, Martha, was sitting in the recliner, wrapped in 3 threadbare blankets. She looked frail, her skin translucent like parchment paper. The dialysis machine in the corner hummed, a constant, rhythmic reminder of the clock ticking over their heads. Cassie? Martha wheezed. You're home early. Slow night, Ma, Cassidy lied. She couldn't tell her. Not yet. Go back to sleep. Cassidy went into the tiny kitchen and opened the fridge. A jar of pickles, half a loaf of bread, and a carton of milk that expired yesterday. She sat at the wobbly table and buried her face in her hands. Unemployed. $7,000 in debt. Eviction notice on the fridge. No way out. She remembered the card. She pulled the black cardstock from her wet pocket. It was damp, but the gold lion still shone under the flickering kitchen light. She flipped it over. 5:00 a.m. Who would answer a phone at 5 a.m.? She almost threw it away. It was probably a scam. Or worse, a proposition for something illegal. But then she heard her mother cough again, a deep, rattling sound that signaled fluid in the lungs. Cassidy grabbed her burner phone. Her fingers trembled as she punched in the numbers. It rang once. Rowdy Residence. A crisp, British voice answered. Cassidy hesitated. I was given a card by a man in a suit. At Jerry's diner. There was a pause on the other end. Hold, please. 30 seconds of silence. Then, the deep baritone voice she remembered. Miss Miller, Stefano said. He didn't ask who it was. He knew. How do you know my name? Cassidy whispered, gripping the phone. I make it my business to know things, Stefano replied smoothly. I heard about your termination. Jerry Henderson is a fool. I need a job, Cassidy said, cutting to the chase. She had no pride left to sell. I won't do anything illegal. And I won't sell my body. Stefano chuckled, a dark, dry sound like dead leaves crunching. I have plenty of people to do illegal things, Miss Miller. And as for your body, I assure you my interest is purely professional. I need a house manager. A what? My estate requires management. Staff oversight, event coordination, inventory, logistics. I need someone who can handle chaos without blinking. Someone who can stare down a gun or a difficult guest and not drop the coffee pot. Cassidy glanced at the eviction notice. What's the pay? $4,000 a week. Plus benefits. And full medical coverage for immediate family. Cassidy stopped breathing. $4,000 a week. Medical coverage. That would save Martha. It would save everything. What's the catch? She asked. The catch, Stefano said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming serious, is that you will be working for me. And my world is not conventional. You will see things. You will hear things. And you will never, ever speak of them. Total discretion. Total loyalty. Can you do that? Cassidy looked at her mother, sleeping fitfully in the chair. When do I start? A car is already outside your building, Stefano said. Pack a bag, Cassidy. You're moving in right now. The devil doesn't wait for the sun to come up. Be downstairs in 5 minutes. The line went dead. Cassidy ran to the window. Down on the street, amidst the garbage cans and broken glass, sat A.S. Leak, black Rolls-Royce Phantom. A massive man in a suit stood by the rear door, holding an umbrella, waiting. She packed her bag in 3 minutes. She wrote a note for her mom saying she got a live-in care job for a wealthy family, which was technically true. She kissed her mother's feverish forehead, grabbed her coat, and ran out the door. She was stepping out of the frying pan and into the fire, but for the first time in years, she wasn't cold. As she slid into the leather back seat of the Rolls-Royce, the car smelled of expensive cologne, old leather, and danger. The partition rolled down. Stefano Raldi was sitting there, reading a file on a tablet. He didn't look up. Welcome to the family, Miss Miller, he said. The car pulled away, silently disappearing into the dark, rainy streets of Seattle. Cassidy Miller had just sold her soul to the devil, but she had no idea that the devil was looking for an angel to save him. The drive took 40 minutes, leading them away from the urban decay and up the winding, treacherous roads of the highlands. The houses here weren't houses, they were compounds. Gates taller than trees. Cameras on every fence post. The car slowed as it approached a massive iron gate adorned with the same lion crest from the card. The gate swung open silently, revealing a driveway that wound through manicured gardens illuminated by soft, tactical floodlights. At the top of the hill stood the Raldi estate. It was a modern fortress of glass, steel, and dark stone, cantilevered over the edge of a cliff overlooking the churning Pacific Ocean. It was beautiful. It was cold. It was intimidating. Close your mouth, Miss Miller, Stefano said, finally looking up from his tablet. Flies. Cassidy snapped her jaw shut. It's big. It's secure, Stefano corrected. Bulletproof glass. Reinforced steel beams. Independent power grid. It is the safest place in Washington state. Who are you afraid of? Cassidy asked before she could stop herself. Stefano turned. Knit his gray eyes to her. They were devoid of humor. Everyone. The car stopped. The driver opened the door. Cassidy stepped out, clutching her duffel bag. It looked pathetic against the marble driveway. Stefano led her inside. The foyer was like a museum, high ceilings, minimalist art, and an echoing, sterile silence. This is Marco, Stefano gestured to a man standing by the stairs. Marco was older, built like a tank, with a scar running down his cheek and a kind but weary face. He is the head of security. If he tells you to duck, you duck. If he tells you to run, you run. Understood? Yes, Cassidy said, her throat dry. Your quarters are in the East Wing, Stefano continued, walking briskly. You will manage a staff of 12. Cooks, maids, groundskeepers. Your primary duty is to ensure my life runs without friction. I do not want to think about laundry, or groceries, or scheduling. I want to focus on my business. And your business is? Cassidy trailed off. Stefano stopped. He turned to face her. The temperature in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. I am an architect, Cassidy. I build things. Sometimes I have to tear things down to build them. That is all you need to know. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of rain, expensive soap, and gunpowder. Here's your first test, he said softly. Tonight, I am hosting a dinner. 5 guests. Very powerful, very dangerous men. The Kozlov brothers are coming. They are Russian. They do not respect women, and they do not respect weakness. They will try to rattle you. They might touch you. If you spill a drink, or if you cry, or if you show fear, you are fired. And you walk back to your apartment. Cassidy lifted her chin. She thought of the meth head with the shotgun. She thought of Henderson screaming in her face. I don't cry, Cassidy said. And I don't spill. Stefano's lips quirked upward. Good. Dinner is at 8 o'clock. Wear something less blue. The dress lay on the bed in the guest suite like a pool of liquid midnight. It was a deep navy silk, floor-length, with a high neck and an open back. It was elegant, severe, and clearly expensive. There was a note on top of it writ. N in sharp, angular handwriting, asterisk armor up. S asterisk. Cassidy stared at it. 12 hours ago, she was scrubbing dried mustard off a laminate table. Now she was staring at a garment that cost more than her mother's car. She showered, scrubbing the scent of the diner from her skin until she was raw. She pulled her hair back into a tight, severe bun, exposing the sharp line of her jaw. She applied minimal makeup. She wasn't here to be decoration. She was here to be invisible, efficient, and unbreakable. When she descended the grand staircase at 7:45 p.m., the house felt different. The air was thick with tension. Shadows seemed to stretch longer in the hallways. Stefano was waiting in the foyer. He wore a tuxedo, but he didn't look like a gentleman attending a gala. He looked like a hitman attending a funeral. He adjusted his cufflinks, turning to watch her descend. For a fraction of a second, his hand stilled. His gray eyes swept over her, not with lust, but with a critical, appreciative assessment. Adequate, he said, though his voice lacked its usual bite. High praise, Cassidy replied dryly. The chef is ready. The wine is breathing. The security team is at the perimeter. Do you need anything else? I need you to survive the next 3 hours, Stefano said, checking his watch. The Kozlovs are animals. They will smell fear. If they speak to you, answer briefly. If they insult you, take it. But do not let them see you bleed. The heavy oak doors groaned open. Marco stepped in, followed by 4 men. The Kozlov brothers were giants, Alexei and Dmitri. They wore ill-fitting suits that bulged around their steroid-enhanced muscles. They smelled of vodka, expensive leather, and aggression. Their eyes were cold, scanning the room for threats and weaknesses. Rowdy. Alexei boomed, his voice like gravel in a blender. He opened his arms, feigning friendship. You invite us to your fortress. We are honored. Business, Alexei, Stefano said, not stepping forward to hug him. He asked you to the dining room. Let's eat before the food gets cold. The dinner was a torture session disguised as a meal. The dining room was dimly lit, the long mahogany table set with crystal and silver that gleamed like weaponry. Cassidy stood by the sideboard, her hands clasped behind her back, watching the staff serve the first course, a delicate truffle risotto. The conversation was a minefield. They spoke of territories, of shipments from the docks, of problems that had been eliminated. Cassidy absorbed it all, her face a mask. She realized quickly that Stefano wasn't just a businessman. He was a king holding back a barbarian horde. So, Dimitri said, leaning back and picking his teeth with a silver fork. He turned his heavy gaze toward Cassidy. He had been watching her for 20 minutes, his eyes tracking her every movement like a wolf circling a deer. Who is the pretty thing? I haven't seen her before. New toy, Stefano? The room went silent. The air pressure dropped. Stefano cut his steak, his knife scraping against the china with a deliberate, screeching sound. She is my house manager, Dimitri. She is staff. She is off limits. Dimitri laughed, a wet, ugly sound. Staff? In Russia, staff is included in the hospitality. He snapped his fingers at Cassidy. You. Girl. More wine. Cassidy didn't flinch. She picked up the bottle of 1996 Bordeaux. She walked around the table, her steps silent on the Persian rug. She approached Dimitri's right side. As she leaned in to pour, Dimitri's hand shot out. He grabbed her wrist. His grip was bruising, his thick fingers digging into her tendons. You have a steady hand, Dimitri sneered, pulling her closer. The wine bottle hovered dangerously over his lap. Are you steady everywhere else? Stefano stopped eating. He set his knife down. His hand moved under the table, undoubtedly toward the gun strapped to his ankle. Marco, standing in the corner, tensed, his hand going to his earpiece. Cassidy felt the pain shooting up her arm. Her instinct was to scream, to pull away, to smash the heavy glass bottle into his temple. That was the diner instinct. The fight for survival. But she remembered Stefano's words. Do not let them see you bleed. She didn't pull away. She didn't look at Stefano for help. She looked directly into Dimitri's black, soulless eyes. Sir, Cassidy said, her voice calm, bordering on bored. You are gripping the ulnar nerve. If you squeeze harder, my hand will spasm, and this $3,000 vintage will ruin your Italian silk trousers. I imagine red wine stains are difficult to explain to your dry cleaner. Dimitri blinked. He expected fear. He expected tears. He didn't expect a lecture on stain removal and anatomy. Besides, Cassidy continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that only the table could hear, Mr. Raldi prefers his carpets clean. It would be rude to make a mess in a house that isn't yours. For a second, nobody breathed. Dimitri stared at her, his jaw working. Then, slowly, he released her wrist. She has a tongue on her, Dimitri grunted, turning back to Stefano. I like her. She is not for sale, Stefano said, his voice ice cold. And if you touch my staff again, Dimitri, we will skip dessert and go straight to the part where my men drag you out by your ankles. The threat hung in the air, heavy and real. Dimitri laughed it off, but the power dynamic had shifted. Stefano hadn't just defended her. He had drawn a line in the sand for her. Cassidy finished pouring the wine without spilling a drop. She returned to the sideboard, her wrist throbbing, her face impassive. When the Russians finally left at midnight, the silence that followed was deafening. The heavy doors slammed shut, and the roar of their SUVs faded down the drive. Stefano stood in the foyer, loosening his tie. He looked exhausted. He turned to Cassidy, who was collecting the crystal glasses. Let the maids do that, he said. I'm already here, Cassidy replied. Stefano walked over to her. He reached out and took her hand. Stefano held her hand, the one Dimitri had bruised. He turned it over, his thumb tracing the angry red welt rising on her pale skin. His touch was calloused, lethal, yet surprisingly gentle. You didn't drop the bottle, he murmured, his eyes searching hers. It was a 1996 Bordeaux, Cassidy said, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Seemed like a waste to spill it on a cheap suit. Stefano looked up. For the first time, the storm in his gray eyes had cleared. There was no thunder, only a quiet, intense focus. You did well, Cassidy. Go to bed. Sleep in tomorrow. I have to check the perimeter logs. I have to check the inventory for... Go to bed, he interrupted. It wasn't a bark. It was a request wrapped in the velvet of an order. That is a directive from your boss. Cassidy nodded. She pulled her hand away, but the ghost of his touch lingered on her skin like a burn. As she walked up the grand staircase, she felt the weight of his gaze on her back, watching her until the shadows of the east wing swallowed her whole. The Raldi estate, once a cold mausoleum of stone and silence, began to breathe. It was subtle at first. Fresh flowers appeared in the hallways, white lilies and hydrangeas that cut through the brutalist gray architecture. The kitchen, usually a sterile lab for utilitarian meals, began to smell of roasted garlic, rosemary, and baking bread. Cassidy Miller had not just taken a job. She had conquered a kingdom. She ran the house with the same military precision she had used to manage the diner rush, but with a grace that stunned the staff. The maids adored her because she defended them against the temperamental French chef. The security team respected her because she memorized their coffee orders and brought them sandwiches during the graveyard shift. But the biggest change was in Stefano Raldi. The ghost was becoming human. It happened in the margins. Cassidy noticed he suffered from blinding me. Grains after the commission meetings, so she started leaving peppermint tea and extra-strength aspirin on his desk without a word. She noticed he hated the oppressive silence of the library, so she began playing low, smoky jazz records in the evenings. He never thanked her. He just drank the tea. He just listened to the music. And he stopped carrying his gun inside the house. Rain lashed against the bulletproof glass. The door burst open. Stefano stumbled in, soaked to the bone, water mixed with blood dripping onto the hardwood. He bypassed the medical wing and collapsed into his leather chair, clutching his left shoulder. Cassidy found him there minutes later. She didn't scream. "I'll call the doctor," she said, reaching for the secure line. "No," Stefano grunted, his face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. "No doctors. No records. Just help me with the jacket." Cassidy didn't argue. She fetched the trauma kit from the master bathroom. She knelt between his legs, her scissors slicing through the wet, expensive Italian fabric of his shirt to reveal the wound. A bullet had grazed the deltoid, deep, ugly, but not fatal. Her hands were steady. She cleaned the wound with antiseptic, her brow furrowed in concentration. Stefano watched her. The pain was white-hot, but the sensation of her cool hands on his burning skin was a narcotic. He looked at the curve of her neck, the way a loose strand of brown hair fell over her eyes. "Why are you still here, Cassidy?" he asked quietly. Cassidy paused, holding a gauze pad. "Excuse me? You have enough money now. You've saved $40,000. You could leave. You could get your mother the best care in the country and never see a gun again." Cassidy finished taping the gauze. She looked up, her hazel eyes locking with his. "My mother is safe because of you," she said, her voice raw and honest. "The specialists you flew in? They say she's going into remission. You saved her." "I paid for a service," Stefano dismissed, "Lukey. Ing away." "You gave me a life," Cassidy corrected. She reached out, forcing him to look at her. "And I don't run away when things get hard, Stefano. I thought you knew that by now." She stood up to leave, but Stefano caught her hand with his good arm. He pulled her back. The air between them crackled, charged with 2 months of unspoken tension, stolen glances, and shared danger. "Cassidy." He breathed, his voice rough. He leaned in. She didn't pull away. Her breath hitched. His face was inches from hers, the scent of rain and iron filling her senses. The red emergency strobe on the wall began to flash. A siren wailed, a low, oscillating mechanical scream that signaled a catastrophic perimeter breach. The moment shattered like glass. Stefano was instantly the Don again. The vulnerability vanished. He released her, grabbing a spare Glock 19 from his desk drawer. Get to the safe room. Now. What's happening? Someone is inside the walls, Stefano snarled, checking the chamber. The biometric sensors on the west gate were bypassed. Only someone with high-level clearance could do that. Cassidy's heart plummeted. The west gate? That's where Marco is stationed. Go! Stefano roared, pushing her toward a hidden panel in the bookshelf. But Cassidy didn't go. She ran to the window, peering through the slats of the blinds. Down in the rain-swept garden, she saw shadows moving. Not just one or two. A dozen. They weren't moving like thieves. They were moving like a hit squad. And leading them, holding a tablet to deactivate the motion sensors, was a man in a rowdy security uniform. It wasn't Marco. It was Jerry. Cassidy gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Jerry. What? Stefano was at her side. Jerry Henderson, she whispered, horror dawning on her. My old boss. From the diner. Stefano froze. The diner owner? That's impossible. He knew I worked here, Cassidy said, the dots connecting in her mind like a constellation of betrayal. He saw the card that night. He must have sold the info to your enemies. He knows the shift changes because I used to tell him my schedule. Stefano, he knows the codes. The glass of the downstairs conservatory shattered. Automatic gunfire erupted in the hallway below. They're inside, Stefano said, his face hardening into stone. The safe room is cut off. He looked at Cassidy. There was no time for romance. No time for fear. Do you know how to use a gun? Cassidy looked at the sleek black weapon he held out to her. She shook her head. No. Point and pull, Stefano said, shoving the cold metal into her palm. The safety is off. Stay behind me. We have to get to the garage. They moved into the hallway. The power had been cut. The only illumination came from the strobe lights and the muzzle flashes of the loyal security team dying downstairs. They reached the top of the landing when a figure stepped out from the shadows of the guest wing. A mercenary in tactical gear raised a silenced rifle. Stefano saw him first. He shoved Cassidy against the wall, shielding her with his own body. 2 bullets slammed into Stefano's back. The hidden Kevlar vest under his shirt caught the rounds, but the impact was like a sledgehammer. It knocked the wind out of him, sending him stumbling to his knees. Stefano! Cassidy screamed. The assassin racked a bolt, aiming for Stefano's exposed head. Cassidy didn't think. She didn't analyze. She stepped out from the wall, raised the heavy gun with both trembling hands, and screamed. The gun kicked like a mule, nearly flying out of her hands. The shot went wild, shattering a Ming vase, but it forced the assassin to duck for cover. Cassidy grabbed Stefano's collar, hauling him up with a strength born of pure adrenaline. They scrambled down the back service stairwell, the narrow, winding stairs that Cassidy used for laundry. She knew these halls better than anyone. She knew which steps creaked. She knew the blind spots. They burst into the kitchen. It was empty, the St. Endless steel gleaming in the moonlight. The back door, Cassidy panted, supporting Stefano's massive weight. It leads to the delivery bay. My car is there. The old Honda. The tires are flat, Stefano wheezed, clutching his ribs. I saw them. I fixed them last week. Cassidy snapped. Because I'm the house manager and I fix everything. They crashed through the back door into the storm. The rain was torrential. Cassidy shoved Stefano into the passenger seat of her rusted, dented Honda Civic. She jumped into the driver's seat, jamming the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered. Come on, baby, Cassidy pleaded. Don't die on me now. The kitchen door flew open. A mercenary burst out, raising his weapon. The engine roared to life. Cassidy slammed it into reverse, ignoring the rearview mirror. She floored it. The car shot backward, the bumper clipping the mercenary's knees, sending him sprawling into the mud. She spun the wheel, shifted into drive, and tore down the service road. The Honda rattled and shook, but it moved. As they sped through the rear gates, shattering the wooden barrier, Cassidy looked over at Stefano. He was slumped against the window, breathing hard, watching her with a mixture of pain and absolute awe. "Where are we going?" he rasped. Cassidy gripped the wheel, her knuckles white. She checked the mirror. No headlights yet. "The only place nobody will look for a billionaire mafia boss," Cassidy said, her eyes steely. "Where?" "My mother's apartment in the projects," she said. "Welcome to the hood, Stefano." Stefano let out a dry, pained laugh before passing out. The apartment smelled of bleach, old cabbage, and damp plaster. It was a sensory assault compared to the lavender-scented air of the estate. But to Stefano, slipping in and out of consciousness on the lumpy floral couch, it smelled like safety. Cassidy had dragged him up 4 flights of stairs. She weighed 120 pounds soaking wet. He weighed 210 pounds of pure muscle. Adrenaline was a miraculous drug. She had pushed the couch against the wall, drawn the blackout curtains, and boiled water on the stove. "Drink," she commanded, lifting his head. She held a chipped mug featuring a cartoon cat that said, "Hang in there." Stefano Gr. owned, the bitter taste of cheap instant coffee hitting his tongue. He opened his eyes, trying to focus. "Where is your mother?" Stefano rasped, trying to sit up. A sharp pain ripped through his side, and he hissed. "She's at the clinic you paid for," Cassidy said, her voice tight. She was tearing a clean bedsheet into strips. "She stays there during the week for treatment. The apartment is empty. Just us." She knelt beside him. On the coffee table lay a bottle of rubbing alcohol, a sewing needle, and a spool of thread. "I need to stitch you up," she said, her hands shaking slightly now that the initial panic had subsided. The bullet hit the vest, but the impact tore the skin and cracked a rib. "You're bleeding pretty bad." Stefano looked at the needle. "Do you know how to sew?" "I mend my own uniforms," she said, threading the needle with grim determination. "Skin is just fabric that bleeds. Hold this." She handed him a wooden spoon. "Bite down. I don't have morphine." For the next 20 minutes, the only sounds in the apartment were the hum of the old refrigerator and Stefano's ragged breathing. He didn't scream. He bit into the wood until it splintered, sweat beading on his forehead, his gray eyes locked on Cassidy's face. He watched her. He watched the way she bit her lip in concentration. He watched the way she didn't look away from the blood. She was stitching him back together with the same pragmatic efficiency she used to count change. "Done," she whispered, cutting the thread. She taped a thick pad of gauze over the wound. Stefano spat out the spoon. He was pale, shivering from shock. Cassidy grabbed the quilt from her mother's bed, a patchwork of ugly, bright colors, and tucked him in. "You need to sleep," she said, brushing the damp hair off his forehead. "Why?" Stefano asked, his voice barely a whisper. He grabbed her wrist, weak but insistent. "Why what?" "Why save me?" he asked. "You could have run. You could have let them kill me and disappeared. You're free, Cassidy. You were always free." Cassidy sat on the floor beside the couch, resting her head against the cushion near his shoulder. She looked at the peeling paint on the ceiling. "You didn't look at me like a waitress," she said softly. "That night in the diner. You didn't look at me like I was invisible, or stupid, or a piece of meat. You looked at me like I was capable. Like I was your equal." She turned to look at him. And besides, she smiled a sad, tired smile. "I kind of like the dental plan." Stefano closed his eyes. For the first time in his life, the monster felt something other than rage or hunger. He felt peace. "If we get out of this," Stefano murmured, drifting into sleep, "I'm going to buy you a whole hospital." The morning brought gray light and a buzzing phone. Cassidy had fallen asleep on the floor. She woke up stiff, her hand still holding Stefano's. He was awake, sitting up, staring at the ceiling. His color was returning. "My phone," he said. "Do you have it?" Cassidy pulled his encrypted satellite phone from his bloody jacket pocket. "It's been blinking red." Stefano grabbed it. He punched in a code. "Marco," he barked. Cassidy held her breath. If Marco was dead, they were alone. "Boss." The voice on the other end was crackly, but alive. "Thank God. I'm at the safe house in Tacoma. We lost 3 men, but we held the perimeter." "Who was it?" Stefano demanded. "It was the Moretti family," Marco confirmed. "But they had inside help. We found the access logs. It was Jerry Henderson's code that opened the gates. The rat from the diner." Stefano's jaw tightened. "And the estate?" "Overrun. Moretti is sitting in your chair, boss. He thinks you're dead. They saw the blood in the driveway. They think you crawled away to die in the woods." "Good," Stefano said, his eyes cold and sharp. "Let them think I'm a ghost. Gather the remaining men. The loyal ones. Meet me at the shipyard at midnight. We take it back." "Boss, you're injured," Marco protested. "I have a very capable nurse," Stefano said, glancing at Cassidy. "We finish this tonight." He hung up. He tried to stand, groaning as his ribs protested. Cassidy was there instantly, her shoulder under his arm. "You're not going to a shipyard," she argued. "You can barely walk." "I don't need to walk," Stefano said, a dark smirk playing on his lips. "I just need to pull a trigger. But I need you to do something for me first, Cassidy." "What?" "I need you to go to work." Cassidy blinked. "What?" "Jerry Henderson thinks he's a kingmaker now. Where's the one place a man like that goes to gloat?" Cassidy's eyes widened. "The diner." "Exactly. He'll be there, probably counting his money. I need you to walk in there, Cassidy. I need you to be the distraction." "And what are you going to do?" Stefano checked the magazine of his gun. "I'm going to order a coffee." The rain had stopped, but the streets were slick and black. Jerry's 24-hour diner was glowing like a beacon in the night. Inside, Jerry Henderson was indeed celebrating. He had a bottle of champagne, cheap stuff, open on the counter. He was sitting with 2 of Moretti's soldiers, men in leather jackets who looked out of place in the pastel booth. Jerry was laughing, his face flushed. "I told you, easy money. I knew the codes because the girl wouldn't shut up about her fancy new job. Dumb broad." The bell above the door jingled. Jerry spun around, expecting a customer he could yell at. His jaw dropped. Cassidy Miller walked in. She wasn't wearing her uniform. She was wearing a pair of jeans and an oversized black hoodie. She looked tired, her hair messy. She looked defeated. Well, Jerry sneered, sliding off his stool. "Look what the cat dragged in. The prodigal waitress returns." The 2 Moretti soldiers straightened up, hands drifting to their jackets. "I need my final paycheck, Jerry," Cassidy said, her voice trembling just enough to be convincing. "I lost the job. The house got attacked. I barely got out. I have no money." Jerry laughed, a cruel, braying sound. "You lost the job, honey? Your boss is dead. I made sure of that. You're lucky I don't have these gentlemen finish you off just for loose ends." "Please," Cassidy begged, walking closer to the counter, her hands visible and empty. "Just give me the $60 you owe me. I'll leave town. I swear." Jerry felt powerful. He was the man who took down Stefano Raldi. He puffed out his chest. "You want your money?" Jerry grabbed a handful of coins from the tip jar and threw them at her. Pennies and dimes scattered across the linoleum, rolling under the tables. "Pick it up. On your knees. Where you belong." Cassidy looked at the coins. She looked at Jerry. And then, the trembling stopped. She smiled. It was the same cold, calm smile she had worn the night of the robbery. Actually, Jerry, she said, her voice hardening into steel. I think you're the one who's going to be on his knees. What? The back door to the kitchen, the same door the robbers had fled through months ago, slammed open. This time, it wasn't meth heads. Stefano Raldi walked out of the kitchen. He was pale, leaning heavily on a cane he had fashioned from a broom handle, but the gun in his hand was steady as a rock. Behind him, Marco and 4 heavily armed enforcers poured into the room. Raldi. Jerry stuttered, his face turning the color of old milk. You're dead. The 2 Moretti soldiers tried to draw their weapons. Stefano didn't hesitate. 2 shots. Clean and precise. The soldiers dropped to the floor, groaning, clutching their legs. Stefano limped forward. The diner fell silent. He walked right up to Jerry, who was trembling so hard the champagne bottle rattled against the counter. You have a bad habit of treating your staff poorly, Jerry, Stefano said conversationally. He placed his gun on the counter, right next to the donut display. You sold me out, Stefano said. For what? Money? Moretti promised me protection. Ari squealed. He said you were weak. He said you were going soft because of the girl. Stefano looked at Cassidy. She was standing amidst the scattered coins, her head held high. I didn't go soft, Stefano said, looking back at Jerry. I just found something worth fighting for. Stefano nodded to Marco. Take him. The police will find him tied up out back with a full confession of his insurance fraud and his involvement in the Moretti Rico case. He's going to jail for a very long time. Marco grabbed Jerry by the collar and dragged him, screaming, out the back door. Stefano turned to Cassidy. The adrenaline was fading, and the pain was returning. He swayed slightly. Cassidy was there in an instant, her arm around his waist. You okay? She asked. I ordered a coffee, he joked weakly. Machine's broken, she replied, the corner of her lip twitching. You'll have to settle for water. Stefano looked around the diner. The place where they met. The place where she saved a life, and he found a soul. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He had retrieved it from the safe in the apartment before they left. It wasn't a ring. It was a key. What is this? Cassidy asked. Moretti is gone, Stefano said. My men are clearing the estate as we speak. But I'm not going back there. Not to live. It's too cold. He pressed the key into her hand. There's a villa in Tuscany, he said. It overlooks a vineyard. It has a big kitchen. It smells like rosemary, not rain. My mother left it to me, but I never went. I didn't have anyone to go with. He looked deep into her eyes. I'm retiring, Cassidy. I'm done. The business. Marco can run it. I want out. I want peace. He paused, his voice vulnerable. But the villa is very big. And I don't know how to cook. I need a manager. Cassidy looked at the key. She looked at the man who had terrified her, challenged her, and protected her. The man who had let her stitch his wounds in a project apartment. I'm expen. Civ, she warned, tears pricking her eyes. I know, Stefano smiled, leaning his forehead against hers. You charge a heart for a heart. Deal, she whispered. Stefano kissed her. It wasn't a movie kiss. It tasted like rain, exhaustion, and hope. It was the seal on a contract that would last a lifetime. The sun over Tuscany was golden and warm. The air smelled of ripening grapes and fresh bread. On the terrace of a sprawling stone villa, Cassidy Raldi set down a tray of espresso and biscotti. She looked healthy, her skin glowing, the dark circles gone forever. Sitting at the table, reading a newspaper, was Stefano. The scars on his chest had faded to white lines. He looked younger, the weight of the underworld lifted from his shoulders. Martha is calling it too, Cassidy said, sitting across from him. She says the doctors are amazed at her recovery. She wants to visit next month. She is welcome, Stefano said, putting down the paper. We have plenty of room. He reached across the table and took her hand. His grip was warm. Any regrets? He asked. Missing the rain? The diner coffee? Cassidy looked out over the rolling hills of Italy. She thought about the gun in her face. She thought about the cold nights. She thought about the moment she decided not to run. No, she said, squeezing his hand. Best tip I ever got. Stefano smiled, and for once, the lion looked like a lamb. They were far from the shadows of Seattle, but they carried the fire with them. The waitress and the mob boss. The most dangerous couple in Italy, not because of their guns, but because they had survived the storm together. And there you have it. From a rainy diner in Seattle to a sun-drenched villa in Tuscany, Cassidy didn't just survive the robbery, she stole the heart of the most dangerous man in the city. It's a reminder that sometimes, strength isn't about how loud you can scream or how hard you can punch. Sometimes, strength is just staying calm when the world is falling apart, and being brave enough to love the person behind the mask. What about you? If you were in Cassidy's shoes, would you have called the number on the card? Or would you have thrown it away? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story melted your heart or kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story like this. We have a crazy thriller coming up next week that you won't believe. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.